Good. Good, good, good. Do, do, do. Good morning and welcome to Coffee Time. Um, there we go. Oop, here are little puppies in the background. Something must be delivered or someone coming up to the door. Signals are a little better this morning. Um, Hope this finds you well and blessed. Appreciate you joining this morning. We're going to pick it up where we left off yesterday. We're talking about the kings of there we go. Turn that back on. We're talking about the kings of Israel, and David has just passed, or in the process of passing, and Solomon now is going to be struggling for the throne. Okay, let's see here. I know that yesterday it was pretty dark on the screen because of the bright sunlight behind me, so I'm trying to get positioned just a little bit so this camera will pick that up, or try to. So sorry for the bad picture if you can't see me. And so let's pick it up and review first where we're at. Okay, so David is aged. In 1 Kings, what we find is this: King David was old and advanced in years, and although they covered him with cloths, he could not get warm, and so they found someone to lay beside him. Now, think about this for a moment. His most trusted advisors had done this because King David had lost his stuff. He was no longer the great warrior or tactician. He was no longer the great person that he once was. And so they're worried because they don't know what's going to happen. And so they're trying to boost him up and get him going, but it's just not happening. Just not happening. And so his son Adoniah, now that would be the son that was born to him in Hebron, and so he would have been the next oldest. So it'd be Absalom, and then then we are not Amon, Absalom, and then him. Adoniah. And so Adoniah says, I will be king. That's verse 5. And, he made a big deal about it. He got chariots, he got foot soldiers. The people seem to have been behind him, or at least part of the people. And the note I made yesterday about this is that the scripture said he's very handsome. Well, Saul was very handsome, David was very handsome. And so what's happening here is that, he certainly fits the mold, but also remember is that there's some parallels. Saul's kingship was ended in disaster. David's kingship started strong and then took a nosedive, and that was because of his blood guilt. And remember, he has the blood guilt because he had Uriah murdered because he lusted after Uriah's wife Bathsheba, and that the child that Bathsheba conceived ultimately died because of this, and that everything was just went downhill from there. Well, he has another child with Bathsheba and names him Solomon. Now he's way down the line as far as ages go. Remember, he's got a lot of kids. I mean, he could fill a school with the number of kids he's got. And so here we have it, and then Adonai does the same thing his father did, and that is he presents sacrifices to God. Now, the important point about this is that when Saul attempted to do that, he got in trouble with Samuel, okay, and just had it bad from that point forward. David does it, and he's blessed. And David becomes the model of the priest king that ultimately the Messiah is supposed to be like. And so Adoniah copies that. He wants to be in that same mold, but notice he doesn't seek God's help, or he does not seek God's anointing. He does not seek God's permission. He's just doing it for show in order to get people to come to him to make him king. And so, he has this big to do, and he invites everybody except David's most loyal supporters. When David's most loyal supporters are surrounding him, they don't get the invite to the big crowning of Adoniah. Now, unfortunately, Adoniah didn't cover all of his bases because then they go to the king, and more particularly, they use Bathsheba to maneuver to get David to be motivated to action because he wasn't doing anything. He's just laying there like a lump. So he totally defeated. And so he says, he reminds us that yeah, he's going to make Solomon king. So let's pick it up where we left off. Okay, verse 15. So Bathsheba went to the king in his room, and the king was very old. And Abishag the Shumite was attending the king. That's the young lady who was just, there for body warmth, and to try to get him re-energized, revigorated, to be the king of old. And Bathsheba bowed and did her obedience to the king. And the king said, "What did you wish?" And she said to him, "My lord, you swore on your servant by the Lord your God, saying, Your son Solomon will succeed you as king, and he shall sit on your throne. But now suddenly Adoniah has become king, though you, my lord the king, do not know it. He has sacrificed oxen, fatted cattle, and sheep in abundance, and has invited all the children of the king, the priest Abiathar, and Joab, the commander of the army. But your servant Solomon he has not invited. But you, my lord king, the eyes of all Israel are on you to tell them who shall sit on the throne of my lord the king after him. Otherwise it will come to pass when my king sleeps with his ancestors that my son Solomon and I will be counted offenders." While she was still speaking, the prophet Nathan came in, and the king was told, "Here is the prophet Nathan." And when he came in before the king, he also did his obedience. He bowed down before him. And to the king, with his face to the ground, Nathan said, "My lord king, have you said Adoniah shall succeed me as king? He shall sit on my throne? For today he has gone down and sacrificed oxen, fatted cattle, sheep in abundance, and has invited all the king's children, Joab, the commander of the army, and the priest Abiathar, who are now eating and drinking before him and saying, Long live the king Adoniah." Oh my. But he did not invite me, your servant, and he didn't invite the priest Zadok and Benaniah, the son of Jehoiada, with your servant Solomon. Has this thing been brought about by my lord the king, and you have not let your servants know who should sit on the throne of my lord the king after him? And so it's a great affront. I mean, you have two kings that are living. It doesn't work out that way. And so the old guard, the most loyal supporters of David, have come to him saying, "Hey, your son's trying to usurp the throne." Now, this has happened before. Absalom tried the very same thing. Didn't end well for him. He ends up getting caught in a tree and getting poked with a whole bunch of spears. Verse 28. Then King David answered, "Summon Bathsheba to me." So she came to the king's presence and stood before the king. And the king swore, saying, "As the Lord lives, who has saved my life from every adversity, as I have sworn to you by the Lord the king of Israel, your son Solomon shall succeed me as king, and he shall sit on my throne in my place. So will I do this day." And then Bathsheba bowed her face to the ground and did her obedience to the king and said, "May my lord King David live forever." And then King David said, "Summon to me the priest Zadok and the prophet Nathan, and of Benaniah, son of Jehoiada." When they came before the king said to them, "Take with you the servants of your lord, and have my son Solomon ride on my own mule, and bring him down to Gihon, and there let the priest Zadok and the prophet Nathan anoint him king over Israel, and then blow the trumpet, and saying, Long live King Solomon. And you shall go up to follow him, and let him enter and sit on my throne, and he shall be king in my place, for I have appointed him to be ruler over Israel and over Judah." Well, Benaniah, son of Jehoiada, answered the king, "Amen, my lord, may the Lord, the God of my lord the king, so ordain. And as the Lord had been with the lord the king, may he also be with Solomon, and make his throne greater than the throne of my lord King David." Okay, so far God really hasn't been in the mix. It's been people in the mix, and so now we're in this hurry up mode of making another king. and he's seeking, we notice that God is never in the formula. Now think back to when we were studying uh, Samuel, and then we were studying Saul. Think back to there, okay? Now, God was the one who appointed the kings. God is the one who says this is the person going to be king. God appointed Samuel above all. God appointed David above all. And it wasn't that people went to God. God's the one who was the active participant. Well, now suddenly God is silent. So people are struggling with this. When Samuel was warning the people about the nature of a king, this is exactly what one of the things he was referring to. Kings take, kings listen, kings make decisions, kings force things upon people. And so here is an example of that which Samuel was talking about is being fulfilled once again. Okay, continuing verse 38. And so the priest Zadok and the prophet Nathan and Benaniah, son of Jehoiada, with the Cherethites and the Pelethites. Now, those are the hired hands. Those are the mercenaries. Went down and had Solomon ride King David's mule and led him to Gion. There, the priest Zadok took the horn of oil from the tent and anointed Solomon. Then they blew the trumpet, and all the people said, Long live King Solomon. And all the people went up following him, playing on pipes, and rejoicing with great joy, so that the earth quaked at their noise. Adoniah and all the guests that were with him heard it as they were finishing feasting. And when Joab heard the sound of the trumpet, and he said, Why is the city in an uproar? While he was still speaking, Adoniah said, Come in, for you are a worthy man, and surely you bring good news. And Jonathan answered Adoniah, No, for my lord King David has made Solomon king. The king has sent him with the priest Zadok and the prophet Nathan and Benaniah, son of Jehoiada, and the Cherethites and the Pelethites. And they ride with the king's mule, and the priest Zadok and the prophet Nathan had anointed him king at Gion, and they have gone up from there rejoicing, so the city is in an uproar. So that's what happened. Good morning, Elaine. Thanks for joining. Good morning, Miss Phyllis. Thanks for joining. Good morning, Aunt Joan. Thanks for joining. We are in 1 Kings. We're in chapter 1, and we're getting to the end of the chapter. We're in verse 46. And so Solomon now sits on the royal throne. And moreover, king's servants came to congratulate him, saying, May God make the name Solomon more famous than yours, and make his throne greater than your throne. And the king bowed in worship on the bed, and went to pray thus, Blessed be the Lord, the God of Israel, who today has granted one of my offspring to sit on my throne, and permit me to witness it. Now notice, God wasn't in the mix at any time. God didn't come down and say, Hey, you're going to do this. That's not what happened. David, as king, made that decision. God appointed David and anointed David. He was God's own anointed. And then God so far has been silent, has not said anything. That's important. Remember, anything that David touches is not going to work out well. It just doesn't, because he has blood guilt on his soul. I mean, when he murdered Uriah, that soured the well, and there's no way of getting it back. And then all of the guests of Adoniah got up and trembled and went their own way. They abandoned ship. They weren't in the mood for civil war. Adoniah, fearing Solomon, got up and went to grasp the horns of the altar. Solomon was informed, Adoniah is afraid of King Solomon. See, he has laid hold of the horns of the altar, saying, Let King Solomon swear to me first that he will not kill his servant with the sword. And so Solomon responded, If he proves to be a worthy man, not one of his hairs shall fall to the ground. But if wickedness is found in him, he shall die. Then the king Solomon went to have him brought down from the altar. He came to do the obedience to King Solomon, and Solomon said to him, Go home. So there you go. Go home. Chapter 2. When David's time drew near, he charged his son Solomon, saying, I am about to go to the way of all the earth. Be strong, be courageous, and keep the charge of the Lord your God, walking in his ways and keeping his statutes, his commandments, his ordinances, his testimonies, as it is written in the law of Moses, so that you may prosper in all that you do and wherever you turn. Then the Lord will establish his word, and as he spoke to me, if your heirs take heed of their way, and to walk with me in faithfulness with all their heart, with all their soul, there shall not fail your successor of throne on Israel. And so there's a lot at stake here. And we all know what happens is that, even David didn't keep all the commandments. And so from David forward, it's going to be just tough to get anything going right. They're going to have nothing but turmoil from this point forward. And we know this. Moreover, you know also what Joab, son of Zeruiah, did to me, how he dealt with the two commanders of the armies of Israel, Abner, son of Ner, and Amasa, son of Jether. Now, remember, we might have forgotten that, but David didn't forget it. You see, Abner, who had brought the people of Israel to David when David was becoming king, Joab didn't like that, and so Joab stabbed him because Abner had killed his youngest brother. And then Amasa was placed in charge of the army when Absalom had revolted. Amasa was in charge of in charge of Absalom's army. He takes Joab out of that position and put Amasa in that position because of the treachery that Joab had shown due to Abner. And then in a disguise as a soldier, what does he do? Joab goes up, grabs him by the beard. I love the way this is described. Grabs him by the beard, pulls him down, at the same time takes his sword and stabs him in the gut, and then takes him and chucks him in the weeds so no one would see it. So, Joab, not that great of a guy. Not that great of a guy. Okay, continuing. This is in, let's see, 2, 5. We're still not to 6 yet, 5. And see, this picks it up here. Whom he murdered, retaliating in a time of blood, in a time for peace for blood that had been shed in the war, and putting the blood of the war on the belt around his waist and on the sandals of his shoe. Act therefore according to your wisdom, but do not let his gray head go down to Sheol in peace. Deal loyally, however, with the sons of Barzillai, the Gileadite, and let them be among those who eat at your table. For with such loyalty they met with me when I fled from your brother Absalom. There is also with you Shimei, son of Gera, the Benjamite from Berunim, who cursed me with a terrible curse the day I went to Mahanaim. But when he came to meet me at the Jordan, I swore to him by the Lord, I will not put you to death with the sword. Therefore do not hold him guiltless, for you are a wise man, and you will know what you ought to do to him, and you must bring the gray head down to the blood of Sheol. So this is a lot like, if you've seen The Godfather, this is going to be like Michael Corleone listening to Vito Corleone. Vito's dying, Michael's taking over, and Michael's is going to settle all family accounts on the same day. So think about that. This is like The Godfather. And so just imagine Francis Ford Coppola directing this scene from the Bible. Okay, you got the music, and all of a sudden, he's going to be calling upon his own version of Luca Brasi to go and take care of these things. Verse 10. Then David slept with his ancestors and was buried in the city of David. Okay, the time was that David reigned over Israel for 40 years, and he reigned 7 of them in Hebron and 33 in Jerusalem. So Solomon sat on the throne of his father David, and his kingdom was firmly established. Now, okay, David is buried in Jerusalem. Try and find where David is buried. Just a little trivia for you. I just saw that, Elaine. I am so sorry I didn't answer that quicker. Miss Elaine says, how could David write beautiful prose in the Psalms and say he was sinless? That is a great question. Well, obviously he wasn't sinless. But at the time he wrote many of those Psalms was before he was king. and at least that's what we believe. For example, the 23rd Psalm is many scholars believe that was written when he was running away from Solomon, or from, I keep saying Solomon. He keeps running away when he's running away from Saul, so Saul wouldn't kill him. Okay, and so anytime that we read about the enemies of David that are brought low, or the enemies of David that are stopped or halted, then think of the time when he was running. And at that particular time, he was sinless before the Lord. Unfortunately, no, he isn't sinless. No, no, poor David. He succumbed to the very human sin of lust, and that led him down a wicked path that ended in murder, and blood beget blood beget blood beget blood. And so, in effect, he's already telling Solomon to spill a lot of blood. That's not going to work out well for Solomon's reign. Okay, here we go. So think of the Godfather, think of that scene where everything is made right. Verse 13. Then Adoniah, son of Haggith, came to Bathsheba, Solomon's mother, and said, do you come peacefully? And he said, Oh, I'm peaceful, yeah. Then he said, May I have a word with you? And she said, Okay, go on. And he said, You know that the kingdom was mine, and that all Israel expected me to reign. However, the king has turned about, and my brother has become king, for it was from the Lord. Now here it is. He's saying that God put Solomon on the throne, even though he was the one that was supposed to be on the throne. And now I have one request to make to you. Please do not refuse me. And she said to him, Go on. He said, Please ask the king Solomon. He will not refuse you to give Abishag the Shunammite to me as wife. And Bathsheba said, Very well, I will speak to the king on your behalf. Now, remember, if you own the king's stuff, you become the king. That was a truism in the ancient world. So this is kind of some conniving backdoor political stuff. And here we go. And so Bathsheba went to King Solomon to speak to him on behalf of Adoniah. The king rose to meet her and bowed down to her, and then sat on his throne, and had a throne brought for the king's mother, and she sat on his right. And then he said, I have one small request to make of you. Please do not refuse me. And the king said to her, Make your request, my mother, for I will not refuse you. And she said, Let Abishag the Shunammite to be given to your brother Adoniah as wife. And King Solomon answered his mother and said, And why do you ask Abishag the Shunammite for Adoniah? Ask for him the kingdom as well, for he is my elder brother. And ask do not only for him, but also for the priests, Abiathar, and for Joab, son of Zeruiah. Then King David swore by the Lord, So may the God do to me, and more so also, for Adoniah has devised this scheme at the risk of his life. Now therefore, as the Lord lives, who has established me and placed me on the throne of my father David, and who has made me a house as he promised, today Adoniah shall be put to death. And so King Solomon sent Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, and struck him down, and he died. I mean, okay, there's number one. The king said to the priest Abiathar, Go to Ananoth to your estate, for you deserve death, but I will not at this time put you to death, because you carried the ark of the Lord before my father David, and because you shared in the hardships of my father endured. And so Solomon banished Abiathar from being priest to the Lord, thus fulfilling the word of the Lord he had spoken concerning the house of Eli in Shiloh. Remember, that was to come to a complete and utter end. When the news came to Joab, for Joab had supported Adoniah, though he had not supported Absalom, Joab fled to the tent of the Lord and grasped the horns of the altar. And when it was told the King Solomon, Joab had fled to the tent of the Lord. It's base. I'm on base. You can't do anything to me. And then Joab fled to the tent of the Lord and is now beside the ark. Solomon sent Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, saying, Go, strike him down. So Benaiah came to the tent and said to him, The king commands, come out. But he said, No, I will die here. And then Benaiah brought the king's word again, saying, Thus says Joab, and thus he answered me. And the king replied, do as he has said, strike him down and bury him, and thus take away from me and my father's house the guilt for the blood that Joab shed without cause. That's a reference to Abner and Amasa. Okay. The Lord will bring back his bloody deeds on his own head, because without the knowledge of my father David he attacked and killed the sword 2 men more righteous and better than himself, Abner son of Ner, commander of the army of Israel, and Amasa son of Jether, commander of the army of Judah. So shall their blood come back on the head of Joab and on the heads of their descendants forever. But to David and to his descendants and to his house and to his throne there will be peace from the Lord evermore. Then Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, went up and struck him and killed him and buried him in his own house near the wilderness. Keeping count? Not over. The king, the king put Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, over the army in his place. So now we have a new army commander. And the king put priest Zadok in place of Abiathar. So Zadok already was a priest, but the power shifts kept moving back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And so now it's solely in Zadok's hands. Okay, now he's an aged person now. Okay, Abiathar was the son of one of the other priests. Okay, so here we go. Then the king sent and summoned Shimei, and said to him, build yourself a house in Jerusalem and live there, and do not go out from there to any place whatever. For on the day you go out and cross the Wadi Kidron, know for certain that you shall die. Your blood shall be on your head. And Shimei said to the king, the sentence is fair, as my lord the king has said, so your servant will do. So Shimei lived in Jerusalem many days. So he was under permanent house arrest. But it happened at the end of 3 years that 2 of Shimei's slaves ran away to King Achish, son of Maacah of Gath. Now remember, Gath was the home of Goliath. Okay, Gath was the home of Goliath. So there's some intrigue here coming. When it was told to Shimei, your slaves are in Gath, Shimei rose, saddled a donkey, and went to Achish in Gath in search of his slaves. Shimei went and brought his slaves from Gath. When Solomon was told that Shimei had gone from Jerusalem to Gath and returned, the king sent and summoned Shimei and said to him, did I not make you swear by the Lord and solemnly adjure you, saying, know for certain that on the day you go out and go to any place whatsoever you shall die? And he said to me, the sentence is fair, and I accept. Why then have you not kept your oath to the Lord and the commandment which I charged you? The king also said to Shimei, you know that on your own heart all the evil that you did my father David, so the Lord will bring back your evil on your own head. But King Solomon shall be blessed with the throne of David, and shall establish it before the Lord forever. Then the king commanded Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, and they went out and struck him, and he died. So the kingdom was established in the hand of Solomon. Okay, now here's the $64,000 question. Would any of this have happened if David would have taken a very firm, direct action and acted like the king he was supposed to be all along? All this bloodshed, I bet, could have been avoided. Could have been avoided. So, we have this turmoil, the settling of the throne, and nowhere in here do we hear from God. Nowhere in here. God has not jumped up and said, yo, not happening. Not happening. Okay, so all this blood is spilled. Blood guilt is accumulated, even though the excuse is this is going to make it all go away. It doesn't. So let's hear what happens immediately next. Okay, here we go. Now this is chapter 3, verse 1. Solomon made a marriage alliance with Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And he took Pharaoh's daughter and brought her into the city of David until he had finished building his own house and the house of the Lord and the wall around Jerusalem. And the people were sacrificing at the high places, however, because no house had yet been built for the Lord. And so what was happening here is people were taking their sacrifices on any high point and making their offerings to God. So the worship was not centralized. It was decentralized and spread out to wherever the priests were. Remember, the descendants of Aaron, which were cut off, and they started a new line. Okay, that new line, they were kind of scattered everywhere. And the Levites, they were kind of scattered everywhere. Now, there were some Levites gathered in Jerusalem because it was their job to take care of that tent and that ark. Okay, so here we go. Solomon loved the Lord, walking in the statutes of his father David, only he sacrificed and offered incense at the high places. The king went to Gibeon and sacrificed there, and for that was the principal high place. Solomon used to offer 1,000 burnt offerings on the altar. At Gibeon the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night, and God said, "Ask what I should give you." This is the first appearance of God. Okay, we haven't heard or seen anything from God for quite a long time. This is the first appearance. Here we go. Uh, and Solomon answered, "You have shown great and steadfast love to your servant my father David, because he walked before you in faithfulness and righteousness and uprightness of heart toward you, and you have kept him from and you have kept him this great and steadfast love, and have given him a son to sit on a throne today. And now, O Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of my father David. Although I am only a little child, I do not know how to go out or to come in, and your servant is in the midst of the people whom you have chosen, a great people, so numerous they cannot be numbered or counted. Give your servant therefore an understanding mind to govern your people and be able to discern between good and evil, for who can govern this great people? It pleased the Lord that Solomon had asked this, and God said to him, "Because you have asked this, and have not asked for yourself long life or riches, or for the life of your enemies, but you have asked for yourself understanding to discern what is right, I now do accordingly to your word. I indeed give you a wise and discerning mind. No one like you has ever been before, and no one like you will rise after you. I will give also what you have not asked for, both riches and honor all your life. No other king shall compare to you. If you will walk in my ways, keep my statutes and my commandments as your father David walked, then I will lengthen your life." Then Solomon awoke, and it had been a dream, and he came to Jerusalem, where he stood before the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and he offered up burnt offerings and the offerings of well-being, and provided a feast for all his servants. Okay, and so the role and the function of the priest king is still active and involved. He hears what God's doing for him. God appears to him in a dream. The dream tells him X, Y, and Z, and he's gonna, he hit the lottery, got the jackpot, gets everything. The price is right. He wins both showcases, and so now he is here. We're in verse 16, chapter 3, and we're going to have to take a pause and wait till tomorrow on that one. So read up. Imagine this was in a movie or a play, and just kind of see what do you think's going to happen next. Because these kings of Israel, they just don't know peace. They're constantly doing stuff. Now, Solomon's reign is unique for a lot of reasons, and we're going to get into that. But I want you just to start looking for those things that make him different than any other king they've had before. Remember, we've got a model of Saul. Saul was a big warrior kind of dude that beat up on the enemies. But, you know, for all his trying, he just didn't put God first, and ultimately that led to his downfall. Even though he did sacrifice, God really wasn't upset at that. What upset God was that they had taken the spoils of war and divided them up amongst themselves, and God had told them not to do that. That's what got him into trouble. David David walked with God. He made offerings to God. He spoke to God on a regular basis until he got a little bit more advanced in age, and he stopped doing that. And so he walked with God close, hand in hand. It is a lot like the perfect image that occurs many hundreds of years later when Ezekiel is given the map of the temple, and there's a space for the king to be with God. Okay, and so this is that conceptualized perfect image of the priestly king, and just David captures that image early in his career, and that's what everybody wants. Now Solomon comes along, and he does not fit either one of those molds. Okay, so he is very different. So we're going to get to Solomon in more depth and detail. Have a wonderful and blessed day, and please remember that God loves you and so do I. Take care. Have a great, great rest of your day.